Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce, bringing timely economic discussion to the region for nearly 40 years. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors: Central Maine Power, Maine Health, MEMIC, and Maine Community Bank. Cooperating sponsors: Martins Point Healthcare and NBT Bank. Reception sponsors: Clark Insurance, KeyBank, and Pretty Flaherty. Community Corner sponsor: Goral Palmer. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors: AAA Northern New England and Mascoma Bank. Parking sponsor: ImPeople Credit Union. Photography sponsor: Bowler and Company. Media partners: WGAN, Maine Trust for Local News, WMTW, Maine's CW, and Wind Media Company. Business news sponsor: Maine Biz. Venue partner: the University of Southern Maine. And thank you to our special community partners: Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kennebec Savings Bank, MEMIC, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, Southern Maine Community College, and the University of Southern Maine. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President Rob Atkinson.
Good morning. You know it's a good event when you have to push past the mayor to get up to the stage. That's a well-attended event. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Eggs and Issues. We're so glad you could join us this morning for the second installment of our spring semester of Eggs and Issues, Maine in Focus. My name is Rob Atkinson, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Public Relations, and I'm honored to serve as the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Today's program, Housing Solutions for Maine, Lessons from Across the Country, will explore Maine's housing shortage, what's driving it, why it persists, and which solutions are proving effective here and across the country. I want to thank all of our sponsors of Eggs and Issues who make this event possible. Without our sponsors' support of Eggs and Issues, the Chamber could not deliver the high-quality speakers, panels, and presentations you've come to expect. So thank you very much. I'd also like to extend a very sincere thank you to our special community partners. These businesses and organizations support not just Eggs and Issues, but all of the 70-plus events the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce produces throughout the year. So please, a round of applause for our generous sponsors and partners. All right, now I'd like to recognize the following businesses, and this is exciting, who are new members of the Chamber. We're grateful to those who have joined over the past month, adding fresh energy, ideas, and leadership to our network. Please welcome us in joining them to the Chamber. This is important if you don't have this on your calendar. Imagine Portland returns on May 27th in Portland. Registration is now open, and we're currently accepting nominations for 3 awards until tomorrow. Scan the QR code on the screen right behind me or on the printed program to learn more, and be on the lookout from an email from the Chamber. Another quick reminder, I saw everyone doing this outside, but complimentary parking is available for all Eggs and Issues events. Got to remember that code, EGGS 2526. If you can't figure it out, ask for help from a Chamber staff or ambassador if needed. Okay, this month's community corner, is the Phoenix, Maine. The Phoenix is a sober, active community that brings together people through movement, connection, and shared experiences. Their mission is to build a supportive community that strengthens resilience and uses the power of connection to help people rise, recover, and live. Their events are free and open to anyone in recovery, as well as family members and supporters of people in recovery. And the only requirement is that you need to be 48 hours of sobriety to participate. Here in Maine, they host a variety of events each month, including roller skating, rock climbing, CrossFit, ice skating, and their Live Well 5K in Portland. If you're interested in attending an event, learning more, or volunteering, please see one of their representatives here today. And as a matter of fact, I think some of them here in the audience, if you are members of the Phoenix, would you please stand so you can be recognized? Please make sure you connect with them before you leave. They do important work. Our Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs program gives local students free access to Eggs and Issues. So for any students in the room with us today, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Now it's time to dive into today's conversation about housing in Maine. Our panelists are Alex Horowitz, Project Director, Housing Policy, the Pew Charitable Trust, and Greg Payne, Senior Advisor, Housing Policy, Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future. Please welcome them to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. We have I should introduce myself, I guess, first of all. Sorry. I'm Quincy Hensel. I'm the CEO of the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we're just so grateful that you have taken time this morning to join us for yet another conversation on housing. We are not going to stop talking about housing until we have enough housing to support the people who want to live and work here and the people we need to live and work here to maintain Maine's strong economy. And today's conversation is going to be really interesting because we're going to be focusing on what's happening in the state as well as on the national level. And before we get into that, I do want to mention that our chamber, in conjunction with 3 other partners, the Maine State Chamber, MERITA, and the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition, has been working strategically together for the last year on a campaign called Build Homes, Build Communities, where the whole focus is figuring out how to unlock housing production across the state of Maine. And we've been really intentionally trying to frame that conversation a little bit differently. Instead of consistently talking about the fact that we are in a housing crisis, we are talking about how housing is the solution. And it's the solution to so many challenges that our communities face, whether it's lack of housing for the workforce, whether it's lack of business development, homelessness, or just thinking about affordability, or I guess unaffordability, the high cost of living right now. Housing is the answer to all of those challenges. So we've really been very intently focused on talking about it, framing it in that way, and really encouraging. The whole point of the coalition is trying to change the hearts and minds of people around housing in their communities, and also doing a pretty big push on the state level, trying to change housing policy. And I want to give a shout out to Patrick Woodcock, who's here from the Maine State Chamber. He has really been spearheading the effort around housing policy on the state level on behalf of the business community in the entire state of Maine. So Patrick, I know you're here somewhere. I want to thank you for that. And we're making strides. It's baby steps, but we're definitely making strides in that regards. So today, I'm really excited to have Greg Payne join us. I don't think this is your first Eggs and Issues, but Greg is Senior Policy Advisor on Housing in the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future. So Greg's going to be giving us kind of a snapshot view of what we've been able to do so far in the state of Maine and what's on the table right now in Augusta. We are in legislative session, and there are some policy pieces that are moving through the State House. And then we're really excited to welcome Alex Horowitz, not just to the stage of Eggs and Issues, but to Maine. Alex is joining us from the Pew Charitable Trust. He is also a Senior Policy Advisor on Housing, and he's going to bring to us a national picture of what other communities are doing. We aren't the only community that is struggling with housing right now, and some communities have really made incredible strides in increasing housing production, which has the added benefit of decreasing the cost of housing and most importantly, the cost of rents. And so he's going to share what's been working in other parts of the country and lessons we can learn here in Maine, and what are some policy areas we should be putting our time and attention to here in our own state. So with that, I would like to start with Alex. I know you have some slides you want to take us through, and then we're going to have some Q&A.
All right, thank you, Quincy. Thanks to the Chamber for hosting this morning. Nice to be with you. Pew's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We do research and policy work in the public interest. So I liked the framing that housing is the solution. I do want to acknowledge that most of what we're talking about is a shortage, that there just aren't enough homes of any kind. And so when there aren't enough homes, it gets more expensive. Inventory has essentially collapsed in Maine. We're looking at a 49% drop in for sale inventory since 2019. We're seeing this in lots of the country. Maine is not unique in this regard, although things are candidly a little worse here than in the US overall. But when you get a collapse like this in inventory, that creates a long-term seller's market. Anyone who's bought or sold a home knows when there aren't enough homes, they probably go over asking because there are too many buyers and not enough availability. And when there are lots of homes out there, that's a buyer's market. Homes go below asking. Well, should be no surprise that the median home price here has risen 76% since 2019. This is exactly what we expect when you have the sort of inventory decline that Maine has experienced. Now, when not a lot of people are selling their homes, right? Okay, less inventory, got it. But right, there was another solution, which is adding more to the market. And Maine's below average rate of housing production means that there hasn't been that additional housing to compensate for the fewer people selling their homes. Now, I mentioned that the kind of buyer's market, seller's market dynamics, those are pretty well known. Because lots of people have bought or sold a home. I think less well known is that rents work exactly the same way. When rental availability gets low, that's a landlord's market, and rents go up. So Maine has seen rents increase a lot since the start of COVID because we're in a landlord's market, which is the same as a seller's market, because there's not enough availability. And when availability rates go down, rents increase. When availability rates go up, rents drop. Not everywhere is having the same experience Maine is having. This is Portland, Austin, Raleigh, Minneapolis. In orange, we see the change in the number of homes. In blue, we see the change in rents. You know what? I tried to make the font size big for you guys, but I made it a little too big for the bars. Not my best work. I'll tell you what they say. All right. Portland, we got a 4% increase in homes and a 24% increase in rents. Austin, we have an 11% increase in home and just a 4% increase in rents. Raleigh, 8% increase in homes, 12% increase in rents. Minneapolis, 6% increase in homes, 12% increase in rents. So rent growth in all of these cities, which are all growing, has been half or less rent growth in Portland over this stretch since 2021. All of these cities are increasing their rate, have a rate of housing production that is at least 1.5 times the rate of housing production in Portland. This explains all of the rent growth here. Austin has been the fastest growing large city in the country, going back a decade and a half. These are headline rents in Austin, and looking at the peak from the middle of 2022 to today, rents have just been dropping the whole time in Austin during this time period. Minneapolis, we're only looking at this going back to 2021. If we go back to 2017, they didn't have any rent growth there from 2017 to 2021, even though the population was increasing during that time. So what did all of these cities do that Portland hasn't done? They made it easier to build, especially apartments. All of them have by right permitting, so automatically allowed apartments in large swaths of the city. For Minneapolis, it's on all commercial corridors and near all transit stops. Raleigh has made it easier to build in most of the city near transit stops. Austin has designated wide swaths of the city where apartments are automatically allowed. Portland has eliminated parking minimums. That was a great step. That's one of the most important things a city can do to allow more housing, but it's not the only thing that is needed. It's one of the ingredients, because parking mandates are wasteful and drive up housing costs. And 30% of low-income households don't even own a car anyway. So look, Portland is got the parking exactly right. The permitting and the by-right apartments, that is really what makes Austin and Raleigh and Minneapolis different from Portland. So they have held rent growth down even while rents have risen at double the rate or faster in Portland as these other growing cities. So I should flag that Maine has unusually small household sizes. 71% of households in Maine have 1 or 2 people in them. That's a lot of small households. Overall in the US, we're down to 9% of households that have 5 or more people in them. Nothing wrong with that, right? My wife and I have 3 kids. Big households are great, but they're 9% of US households. Our housing stock looks like the housing stock that you would have if our average household size was what it was in the 1920s, when a lot of zoning became widely adopted. That is not what households look like today. Maine has smaller average household sizes than any state except for North Dakota and Vermont. So only 22% of Maine's housing stock is multifamily, and that includes duplexes. That's not a great fit for a population where 71% of households have 1 or 2 people. So why is this happening? This is not a market preference. This is mostly the fact that it's relatively easy to build single-family detached homes, and it's relatively hard to build everything else. So the housing shortage, yes, this has driven up prices for everybody. This has driven up rents for everybody, and that's bad news. But when there aren't enough homes, it is low-income households who are hurt the most, because housing works like an escalator. And when there aren't enough homes, the escalator's moving down, and everybody piles up at the bottom. High-income households can trade down, and they do, into middle-income neighborhoods. Middle-income households can trade down, and they do, into lower-income neighborhoods. Lower-income households have nowhere to go. The housing shortage hurts low-income renters the most. That's why we see displacement. It's why we see homelessness. And it's why we see people absorbing really steep rent increases that they really can't afford and that crowds out the rest of their budget. We have an all-time high share of households in the US, renter households, spending more than 50% of income on rent. 50% of income. I understand there is sentiment about not adding housing because it risks displacing low-income renters. But the evidence goes the other way. The evidence goes the other way. When there aren't enough homes, it's low-income renters who are hurt the most. Now, what about when there are enough homes or there's a lot of housing coming online? These are 6 of the fastest growing metros in the US. All of them added a lot of housing, especially when interest rates were low, and saw apartment construction boom. Rents went down year over year in all of them from 2023 to 2024. Rents dropped. But rents dropped the most for Class C apartments. Class C is older, naturally affordable apartments, mostly occupied by low-income tenants. When there is a lot of housing coming online, that escalator moves up again, and people trade up into better options. It sets off what we call vacancy chains. Yeah, the new stuff is fancy, I know. But the people who move into it vacate other homes. The people who move into their homes earn somewhat less. The people who move into the homes they vacate earn somewhat less. This is how a fancy new apartment building with a roof deck and a pool and a dog wash or whatever people like ends up getting people out of homelessness, because it frees up housing and slows rent growth. These are the largest 4 cities in the US: Houston, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Guess which is the only one that did not displace black residents over the past couple decades? It's the one that allows homes. New York, LA, Chicago have all been losing black residents during this time period. They have all been displacing their people because they have not allowed enough homes. They're adding consistently under 1% a year to their housing stock. Houston has been adding homes during this time period, and so they have been able to avoid the sorts of rent increases that displace people and kept their residents. Houston has added 80,000 starter homes in the city over the last couple decades because they reduced their minimum lot size. They stopped forcing people to buy more land than they want or could afford. They let people live on small lots, live in townhouses, live in starter homes, and by reducing their minimum lot size, they were able to make homeownership affordable to truly middle-income households, households earning about the median. Their small lot homes sell there, in a subset we examined, for 38% less than their large lot homes. So if someone household earning around the area median could afford a home, other places are not getting starter home production. Starter homes were about 40% of starts in the 1980s. They're under 10% of starts today. Large minimum lot sizes are a major reason why. Because once you need a large lot, you're going to put a large home on it because builders have to cover their costs of a lot of land. Houston is one of the relatively few places that is adding a lot of starter homes because they're allowing homes on smaller lots by reducing minimum lot size. I'm not going to talk about homelessness much this morning. Do want to flag, though, that homelessness just tracks rents. When rents go up, homelessness goes up. When rents go down, homelessness goes down. And homelessness tracks rents. It's not the only thing that needs to be done to reduce homelessness is getting a handle on rent growth, but the evidence couldn't be more clear that homelessness and rents move in tandem within counties, cities, and states. So this was a local discussion for a long time. States did not step into it. From 2011 to 2016, states only passed an average of 1 law a year to allow more homes. 2025, states passed more than 100 laws, including Maine, to allow more homes. Because housing markets are regional. Localities only control what happens within their borders. If one town allows more homes and none of the surrounding ones do, affordability doesn't really improve. Housing markets are regional. No locality can solve housing affordability on their own. It's great when they take steps forward. We can pick it up in the data that affordability improves, right? You saw that with Raleigh, Austin, Minneapolis. Those are fairly big cities, but even so, it's clear in the data, but housing markets are regional, and so only coordinated state action makes a big difference. Here are states that have allowed apartments on commercial corridors or near transit. Maine is one of them, although it's not one of the strong form laws that has made it a lot easier to build apartments on commercial corridors or near transit stops. And this is one of the most common reforms we're seeing in states, red states and blue states around the country. We're also seeing states pass laws to simplify permitting, to allow third-party inspectors to conduct reviews, to limit environmental reviews and lawsuits, especially because environmental review mostly ends up blocking low-impact, environmentally friendly housing near transit and near commerce. Simplifying process and shortening timelines to build, curbing lawsuits and unrepresentative opposition, and reducing costs for small buildings. So to wrap up, I know not everybody who goes to community meetings loves more housing. There's definitely some concern about allowing enough homes for everyone in a community. But I will say, overall, most people like more housing, and they support it. It's true of Republicans, it's true of Democrats, it's true of independents. Whether we're talking about allowing dorms and affordable housing on land owned by nonprofits, allowing apartments near offices, stores, and restaurants on commercial corridors, like you saw in those cities that have held down rent growth, allowing accessory dwelling units, as Maine has done, and simplifying permitting, which is a big step in the right direction. I know this feels insurmountable, but we are seeing places have success. If you look at Minneapolis, affordability is improving. Austin, affordability is improving. Raleigh, and there are other cities too. I singled those ones out. But what all of them have in common is that they've made it easier to build homes and pulled back regulatory barriers. Thank you.
Incredibly informative. I feel like any one of those slides we could sit on for like an hour and just talk through it. I think one of the slides I found most compelling, or I guess compelling is the wrong word, probably alarming, is the slide that showed Portland compared to 3 other municipalities and how our inventory, increase in inventory is so low, rents so high. So I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that slide and just hear from your perspective, what do you see some of the challenges are with a community like Portland? And if you could also touch on, you and I spoke yesterday about inclusionary zoning. It's a relatively unique ordinance that we have in Portland that just at a very, very high level requires a certain percentage of units to be, that are being built to be deed restricted affordable, and just what the impact of that ordinance might be having on those statistics.
Yeah, look, we've learned a lot in recent years. We know so much more now than we knew 7, 8 years ago, because we've got month-to-month rent data coming in from data providers. Information is spreading faster. Cities are experimenting, states are experimenting, and we've learned a lot. So when it comes to something like inclusionary zoning, and kind of, we do need housing that is subsidized and that is set aside for people who have lower incomes, because even in a healthy, successful market, somebody earning $25,000 or $30,000 a year is going to struggle to afford housing. But the places that are adding the most subsidized housing are also the places that are making it easier to build. Because whether housing is market rate or it's subsidized, it's held back by the same regulatory barriers that don't allow apartments on most land. It's held back by slow permitting. And so the cities I showed you, right, Austin, Raleigh, they don't have inclusionary zoning at all. But they're adding more market rate housing and more subsidized housing because they've made it easy to build. Minneapolis has inclusionary zoning, but it's 8% of units. And they also have by right permitting for apartments, which greatly simplifies the process of building. So builders are willing to build apartments even with that 8% set aside. We don't get a lot of subsidized units out of inclusionary zoning because it's a small fraction. Any given year, even a locality that's doing well is only adding about 2.5% to their housing stock. And so a fraction of that is still not a lot of housing. But there are alternatives. Revolving loan funds are relatively new. We are seeing states, cities, counties adopt revolving loan funds and offer below market rate financing to builders who include below market rate units in their developments. Portland, Oregon is funding inclusionary zoning with tax credits. We're seeing cities that have voluntary inclusionary zoning where they offer some bonuses, some height bonuses to builders who offer below market rate units. All of those have been more successful strategies at adding subsidized housing than requiring a percentage of units to be set aside.
That's really helpful. I'm going to jump around a little bit here in the interest of time. I'm going to throw you both off your game a bit. Because I know Greg also has a presentation that I want to get to in a few minutes. But Alex, you noted, which I was surprised to hear this, that Maine has one of the smallest household sizes in the country. So how does that affect, you touched on it in your presentation, how does that affect the type of communities that we really need to be focused on building?
So people are more interested in being able to walk to restaurants and grocery stores than in having a 5th bedroom or a 4th bedroom if you have 1 or 2 people in the household. So that trade-off becomes pretty attractive, especially when you factor in utility costs, heating and maintenance of a larger home. But most municipalities have put 1 or 2 thumbs on the scale in favor of single-family detached housing on large lots, which is a good fit for large household sizes, not a great fit for small household sizes like those which are most prevalent in Maine.
And Greg, for you, is the policy that we are currently looking at in Augusta, is that trying to address this mismatch of housing types that we currently have in the state?
Sure. I mean, that's real. The reduction in size of household is a demographic change that's been going on for a while in Maine. We do at the state level, certainly for affordable housing transactions and programs. Those are set up and resourced, and the rules and priorities and points, et cetera, are set up in a way where they're producing mostly 1 and 2 bedroom rental units and ownership units. Certainly on the market side of things, one of the things we're really excited about in terms of the zoning reform that we've been able to accomplish to date is allowing every property owner in Maine to add an accessory dwelling unit. That is the kind of resource for that sort of household size. So at some point, obviously, what we're also trying to do is, as Alex was talking about, minimum lot sizes, and not having 2-acre lots with 1 house in it that tends to be a big house. This is what's driving the conversation that we've been having and making real progress on minimum lot sizes that make more sense for climate response, for planning, for making sure that we can have more houses that we need, especially in designated growth areas that towns establish. I do also just want to say on the inclusionary zoning piece, to me, inclusionary zoning and whether it's good or bad is sort of like saying whether lunch is good or bad. It depends on what you're having, and if there's too much green stuff, that's not really fun. But for inclusionary zoning, it's a matter of math and matching what the zoning requirements are with what you can do to accomplish development of housing. And I do think that, clearly the one in Portland needs some tweaking. I get the sense that folks in city government recognize that. I think there's a lot of work being done to make those tweaks. But I do just want to say broadly, beyond the changes to the inclusionary zoning law that may happen that help make the math work better, I will say Portland has been an outlier in how helpful and how great they've been on zoning and land use issues. I mean, the recode effort that they've done has been huge. It's all about putting better density, more appropriate density in the places that we want to see grow, doing that well. The mayor, Greg Watson, I know, is here. I think Councilor Bullitt is here. People are pushing in that direction. If every municipality in Maine was approaching this the way the city of Portland is, I think the state would not need to be as involved in this as we have to be now.
That's so good to hear. Thank you for saying that. Alex, I know you had touched on some policies that communities were adopting to help unlock housing production. Which ones have you found have made the most difference?
So it's not exactly the same everywhere, but pretty consistently allowing apartments by right on commercially zoned land has been the most successful policy at improving affordability. Every city that has seen affordability improve markedly, where the share of income needed to afford the median rent drops by double digits, has done some version of that. If you look at Minneapolis in 2017, to afford the median rent, you had to earn 80% of median income. By 2024, it was only 67%. Austin, 2017, you had to earn 81% of area median income to afford the median rent. By 2024, it was only 65%. That's a big improvement in affordability in 7 years. Having by-right apartments, especially on commercial corridors, where there's typically a lot of space where you have single-story retail, usually with no apartments on top or no apartment building next to it in the acre or half-acre parking lot, has been, that's really been a recipe for separating uses. And especially, I mentioned 30% of low-income households don't own a car. That makes it hard to get to work unless people can live near stores and live near jobs. And so we've seen actually, I showed Minneapolis, where the big increase in housing stock, traffic has actually declined there during that time because the new housing is near commerce.
That's great, interesting, thank you. And Greg, before, I'm gonna have you give a presentation here in a moment, but before we do that, I'd like to hear from you, which of the policies that Alex touched on has Maine already adopted, and where do you think there's work that we still need to do?
Well, I mean, I'd say for all of it, we've done some and probably can do more. I mean, there's so many pieces and parts of this thing. Some of it gets really down into weeds. There's permitting issues. I know that for folks in the room who are building good housing, one of the first things people say is getting DEP permits is tough. The folks at DEP do a really good job. The state has said, hey, DEP, there's all these environmental rules you need to enforce. And by the way, you don't have enough staff. And they recognize that. To their credit, they are looking for solutions. They understand there's a problem. They have recently, for example, in terms of things that are being done, they have recently started a new third-party review process that I understand from folks in the field is working great. They are now, the governor signed into law earlier this week, a legislation that's going to allow them to do more permit by rule for certain kinds of development. They're trying to streamline things. You know, I think when we talk about then what more could we do, there's other states in that space where, you know, they have said there's a shot clock and you got 90 days, DEP, you know, to approve it, and if you don't, it just gets approved. And I think, you know, New Hampshire, Massachusetts have laws kind of like that. Part of the struggle is that when they did those, I think they said, oh, and here's the new staff that can make that possible without harming our environmental regulations in ways we'll regret. So I think maybe that is a next step. Maybe a shot clock thing is a policy of the future. We'll have to see. It'll depend on, you know, elections, and it'll depend on how things go with the changes they've already made. But that's just permitting. There's obviously also zoning and land use. I'll talk a little bit about that. There's maybe perhaps more levers we can pull there. There's regulatory barriers. There's other kind of development barriers like lawsuits. You know, lawsuits that slow down projects or kill projects. You know, we have other states that have done more in that regard. That's another thing that maybe we need more conversation about. Maybe like in New Hampshire with their rocket docket, where they say, okay, if there's a lawsuit, that's your right. You can sue if you don't like a property that might be getting developed in your neighborhood or somewhere else. That's your right to sue, but we're going to resolve that lawsuit quickly. This is not an arrow in the quiver to stop the housing from getting built. This is something we're going to resolve quickly. That's what New Hampshire does. Making that work takes a lot of time and effort, but maybe that's something in the future. So we're doing a lot. We're trying to pull the levers we can. There's always more things we can do. It's these kind of conversations where people tend to come forward with ideas that we can move forward with.
Well, there is a lot happening at the state level around housing policy, and it's been kind of amazing to see this issue get elevated in the State House over the last 3 years. And like huge kudos to the governor who like immediately took housing on and brought somebody like you into this role to spearhead housing policy on the state level. So we'd like to hear a little bit more about what's happening in Maine. So we're going to have Greg share a few slides as well.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. I mean, part of what I was really trying to focus on is less about here's all the stuff we've done and a little bit more about what's going on right now at the State House. Are there any state legislators here? They are in the thick of it right now, and they have sessions starting at 10 o'clock this morning. I think otherwise there'd be a lot of people here from the state legislature. I do want to recognize the Commissioner of the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation, Joan Cohen, is here, who's been a partner on working on manufactured housing communities and regulation of those and protection of residents in mobile home parks. And also, we are trying to move towards incentivizing manufactured housing more, off-site construction, costs we can save, efficiencies we can grow. And so they've been a strong partner with us on that. So I am going to, just so you know, the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation, the Future, is an office that Governor Mills created after she took office. It was based on Kurt Vonnegut's quote that every government ought to have an Office of the Future. We work on big long-term challenges and try to give the governor feedback and policy advice on how we might address those issues. And I obviously was asked to help with housing. The single biggest thing that we've been focused on in administration is adding supply. We fundamentally believe that to the degree we can add supply, we're going to drive down costs. And so there's been a couple of ways we've been trying to do that primarily. One is through investments in proven affordable housing programs to rent and to own. And so what you see here are various things next to the arrows that have been done since the governor took office to increase the supply of affordable housing. 315 million since 2019. That's a huge increase from what the pace of that kind of investment had been prior. In addition to that, last year we have a reform to the real estate transfer tax that is every year going to generate $17 million for more affordable production, for home ownership, and for rental. I will say the result of all of that up there is a pipeline that is the largest in the 50-year history of Maine State Housing Authority. It's a lot of progress. We want to keep doing more. We want to keep that up, and I'll talk about that in a second. Partly also, while we're building more affordable housing, we need to preserve the affordable homes we have. This is where work around mobile home parks is so important. That is affordable housing. We can't afford to lose it to private equity that wants to come in and buy up those parks and jack up the rents on people and force them out. It's a big issue that we need to keep working on. This is on our website. Folks can take a look at. This is just where some of this housing has been getting built. Beyond investments in affordable housing, though, we understand that when you're trying to build affordable housing, it's about the subsidy, because the market can't create affordable housing on its own. So the question is, depending on the type of housing, how much subsidy do you need to make the math work? And so we understand that as much as we're doing that and want to keep doing that, and it matters and it's important, we are never going to build our way out of this crisis through the affordable housing subsidy approach. And so we need to help do what the market needs in order to create the housing that the private market is capable of doing on its own. That's where we get into zoning and land use reform, also permitting and other regulatory issues. But in 2022, the legislature and governor pushed forward with LD 2003. This is what gave every property owner in the state the right to add an accessory dwelling unit, add a statewide affordable housing density bonus. It also created a housing opportunity program, the idea being, okay, localities, we know the state-local relationship is difficult sometimes. I appreciate the fact that, like with Mayor Dion, there is trust and there is an understanding that folks are trying to do the same thing, moving in the same direction. But as we work with communities, it's fraught, it's difficult. Some communities don't want exactly the kind of reforms that we have pushed forward with. And so part of the idea is, in addition to raising the bar a bit on density, we are also going to provide money and technical assistance to help you as a community do more or different beyond what we're passing as a state. And so the Housing Opportunity Program exists at DECD. It's been recently moved over to MOCA. And so there's grants there that are provided to regional collaborations and to municipalities. Last year, we passed more zoning and land use reform. There's a lot here. I'm not going to get into all of this. Certainly, as Alex was talking about, it allows residential uses in commercial districts. It lowers minimum lot size requirements. The idea with most of these is to try to focus the growth in the places that a city has itself said they want their growth to be. So, in Maine, we do these plans where the communities say, here's where we want growth to be, here's where we want farmland, et cetera. And so what we've been doing at the state level is say, okay, well, where you say are your designated growth areas, here's where we want to have a little more density. Here's where lot sizes need to be reduced, et cetera. That is the theme of what you're looking at there. A lot of this is around supporting up to 4 units of housing. There is a lot more that was outside of LD 1829 last year. There were laws passed around parking. There was land use. One of the issues that developers say is, they move forward with the project, and all of a sudden there's an impact fee that nobody told them about. Part of what was done in last year was more transparency in that. We also, at the state level, we have surplus property sometimes. The process by which we we get that surplus property into the hands of developers who can build it. That needed some additional efficiencies added. It now goes through the Maine Redevelopment Land Bank Authority. Tuck O'Brien is here. He's the director of that land bank, but they are helping to get that property into the hands of developers. This is where this is the last slide here, and what I just wanted folks to know is, as we move forward, we want to continue to do affordable housing development. The governor, in her supplemental budget proposal, has another $70 million and that's for ownership and rental housing development and preservation. That's in the budget. That is gone through committee. It got a lot of support in committee. It's now sitting in the Appropriations Committee. They're going to be voting on this in the next couple of weeks. I think to the degree folks see continued investment in affordable housing, that's a place you'd want to push, is with leadership and members of the Appropriations Committee right now. That's in their hands. Just 2 days ago, the Taxation Committee approved, with bipartisan support, the extension of the state affordable housing tax credit. This is $9 million a year towards affordable housing development and $1 million a year for preservation of rural development projects scattered all around our state that would otherwise be losing their affordability restrictions. That $1 million goes to help make sure that mission-based agencies can buy those properties and keep them affordable for another 45 years. So that passed taxation the other day. That is going to the chambers as early as next week. There are other pieces that passed yesterday through committee with bipartisan support, LD 2224. This is where you're getting into a lot of this unsexy stuff that for people who develop housing. Some of you are in the room, you know it matters. Elevators. You know, there have been recent rules to say you got to have a smoke curtain that costs $10,000 a floor. And, you know, the folks in public safety this is an issue where I think the folks in public safety help us understand the benefit on the safety side of when there is smoke in a building, having these curtains drop down on each floor outside the elevators may be a bit marginal in terms of added safety, but it's adding a lot of cost. And so that's in that bill that was passed yesterday. There was also the creation of a new working group on sprinkler costs. This is another place. This is a balance. You know, I think for developers, clearly know getting sprinklers into especially multifamily housing is expensive. And obviously the struggle here and the balance is that our fire safety officials, I think, would say it's a single most important way to save lives. So trying to make sure we're getting that balance right is part of what is going to happen with that working group that the State Fire Marshal's Office is hopefully going to be moving forward with. One of the things we've heard from communities over and over again is that they need help with local code enforcement officers, that they need technical support, they need training, they need funding. And so that has been heard loud and clear. There is funding and supports in a bill that is going to be voted on today, I believe, in the Housing and Economic Development Committee. There is also, I believe today, going to be a vote in the Housing and Economic Development Committee on these incentives to support off-site construction. There are other things that have already happened. I mentioned the environmental protection rules and giving DEP the tools to help make permit by rule happen, to get projects approved more quickly. There's also this, again, it's a little unsexy, but for folks who build housing, you know this matters. If you're trying to build a building and you right now have to have 2 stairwells, that takes up a lot of space. That could be housing. You know, there's a question about, do we need that second stairwell? The state has just approved allowing single stair egress up to 4 stories. Our fire and safety officials said that they think that that is acceptable, and so that's already been adopted, so that we went from 3 stories to 4. You know, and I'll stop there. I just want to say, I have really enjoyed watching the coalition that Quincy was talking about between the Portland Chamber, the State Chamber, Merida, the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition. That has been great. I found myself in this really surreal moment yesterday where Patrick Woodcock is in front of the Housing Committee saying, we love this, but do more. And I was there saying, I don't think we can do more. That's a bit of a surreal moment for me, whereas I was a little to the right of the state chamber. I didn't see that coming. But what I guess I want to say is keep pushing. Like, that is what we need. Maybe we can get to 6 stories, you know, if we can do that in a way that fire and safety officials believe is adequate. So I guess that's just one of the things I would say as I end here, is there has been bipartisan support. It's very helpful trying to get state law passed, trying to get agency change passed when people keep pushing. So I hope you'll do that, and thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in the State House to help us push these housing reforms forward. I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then we do want to open it to Q&A from the audience, so just we'll give us a few minutes up here, so think if you have any questions for our presenters. But Greg, you had mentioned that there have been thousands of housing units funded since 2019, and I think just what's interesting is kind of like the timeline of when like the funding happens, does it actually come online to housing? So how long does it typically take for those investments to translate into new housing on the ground?
You know, it's taken longer than it used to. I would say right now, if you know, we were to allocate funding, Maine State Housing Authority, say, was to allocate funding to a particular development organization, say Avesta, say, okay, Avesta, you have the tax credits and some additional subsidy. From the day that that allocation is made to the time the doors open is probably now at this point in the range of 3 years. Which is longer than it used to be. And part of the reason it's longer than it used to be is because of a lack of workforce. You know, the construction workforce is a big problem. The lack of workers in the trades is one of the reasons why housing is so expensive to build. I'd say it's the single biggest reason why costs have gone up as much as they have. In addition to cost, though, to your question about the time it takes, that's why things that used to take 12 months now take 18 months.
Yeah, it's sort of the chicken egg. Like, we need housing for the workforce, and we especially need housing for the workforce who's building the housing.
Yeah.
So that's challenging. Alex, how does that track with what you've seen in other communities in terms of our timeline?
So environmental review is an area I think increasingly recognized as something that slows down housing production, but it also worsens environmental impact, because environmental review mostly applies in close-in areas where people drive less and where they're near the places they go every day, and usually in areas that have water and sewer. Mm-hmm. And so if environmental review is pushing people to live further out where they drive more and they have septic and well instead, that's not a win. Even California has updated environmental review. I mean, like, this is a big deal. That is where environmental review has really been something that goes on for years, years and years. Even they've updated it. Minnesota has updated it. Washington has updated it. So I think we're increasingly recognizing that the best thing we can do in terms of environmental impact is making it easier to build housing, multifamily and small lot, single family, near commerce, near transit, in places where people have to drive shorter distances. And so the tides have turned on this issue, and we're seeing states where this was sacrosanct, recognizing they can do better for the environment by modernizing their environmental review statutes.
Thank you. This will be, I think, my last question, and then we're going to open it to Q&A. But the coalition that we had mentioned, Build Homes, Build Communities, we have been beating the drum on how housing is an economic imperative for our state. And so here it's a Chamber of Commerce event. We have a lot of business people in the room. So Greg, I'd just like to hear from your vantage point, like, how important is the work we're doing around housing production to the future of our workforce and to the future of our state?
Yeah, I think it's fundamental. Like, we have this opportunity in Maine that I think we just can't afford to miss, where we are an in-migration state. And that didn't used to be the case. We have more people coming to Maine. And that's presented this challenge in terms of supply of housing. That's obviously driven up demand without a corresponding increase in supply of housing. But if we can meet the moment, if we can keep the investments moving forward, if we can continue to find ways that we're reducing barriers to the reasonable density increases we needed in the right place, if we can meet that moment, we can drive Maine's economy forward. And if we don't, my fear is to go back to a place where, we just don't have the workers that we need to become the economy that I think is possible. And we have to be, one thing we haven't talked about is climate migration, which I think we may see sooner rather than later. And, so more people may come to Maine. It's a great place to be. I think that we just need to keep moving forward with this. Like, we're making progress. We're doing things that most other states aren't doing, which is great. I think the issue here, though, is we need to keep pressing. And I think if we do, we'll get the economy that we're capable of having here.
Yeah, we don't want to lose this moment. Like you said, we have people wanting to come here. I hear it every day from all of you, from our business community. They're attracting workers here who then can't find a place to live. And so they obviously can't move here. And that's just devastating. So we need to get ahead of that. Let's open this to Q&A. Do we have some questions from the audience? See one there? There's one in the back too, Kelly, and one here.
Hi, my name is Asia Scudder. I work with Prosperity Maine. And as you know, we are working on a housing development project here in Portland, which we're super excited about. But from a personal note, I have lived in different communities in Oklahoma, also in Massachusetts, where I saw the increase in density in housing put pressure on municipal systems. So the cities themselves were having problems with sewer management, water management, especially those two things that were causing stress for the city and having to make quick upgrades to systems that cost taxpayers more money, which then ultimately raised the tax revenue for housing. So it seemed like kind of a vicious circle. I wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'm happy. It's a great point. I mean, I think one of the things that has happened in this, state-local relationship is, localities have said, okay, we get it, we need more housing, but the very fair point they're making also is we need more infrastructure to accommodate that housing. And I do think, like, one of the things I didn't put on that list of things happening right now is bonds, which is a real shame. Like, bonding is one of the tools we have at the state level to affect the kind of housing and infrastructure development that we need. And so I think this is one of the things I hope, if it's not going to happen in this legislature, and it's not a done deal yet, we need 2/3 in both chambers. I think that's one piece that folks in the room, if there's something you want to do to help impact what's happening now, encourage folks on both sides of the aisle to support bonding. We can do that. And I think if it doesn't happen this year, this is an issue I hope becomes a priority in the next legislature, is bonding for the infrastructure that communities need to accommodate the growth that we all know is necessary. I think that should be a very top issue in the 133rd legislature if it doesn't happen in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Here.
Michael Hutchins, local architect. A lot of this is the third Eggs and Issues I've been to, and a lot of what I've been seeing is kind of reactionary response, where we look at slides of past trends and where it gets us up to in the present. What I'm not seeing a lot of is trying to predict where we might be 5 years from now. Like I feel like everything, I agree with everything you guys are saying up there, but I feel like it's speaking about the past and the present without taking into account where we're going to be 5 years from now, and I feel like that might hurt us. I'm not really I don't know if there's a question there, but I feel like Maine has been reactionary for too long, solving problems that we should have seen coming down the pipeline 5 years ago or longer. And it's kind of, to me, a missed opportunity that we're not looking more into the future. For example, the slide that really got me was the 71% of households in Maine where there's just 1 or 2 people in those. We all know that Maine is the oldest state by age. So to me, it would stand to reason that a lot of those households 5 to 10 years from now may become vacant due to those people either moving into senior living or passing away. So I feel like that needs to figure into the math. I feel like 10 years down the road, there may be a glut. For example, we're reacting right now to what we need. Well, the process is slow, and we're likely going to get there. We're going to build these homes. But at the same time, there's probably going to be a large section of homes that are going to come onto the market because of the baby boomers who are going to leave. So I think it's a super complicated issue that I feel like we're looking at through a micro lens where I think need to look at it more macro and focus more on the future than the present or the past. Just a comment there.
That was my last question that I skipped over, so lesson learned for me. But I was going to ask, 5 years from now, where do you see us? I don't know, Greg, if you want to tackle it quickly. We're kind of out of time, but we can give an answer to that, and then I can wrap us up.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm at the Department of the Future, so we need to be on it. I mean, honestly, the way I see this is that the kind of work we're doing on how we make sure we're regulating spaces, and this is where minimum lot sizes, I think, matter to create the opportunity to do smaller homes. This is where the Affordable Home Ownership Program, for example, is a program that creates starter homes, essentially, and the state provides subsidy, something like $80,000 or $90,000 a unit to make the math work. What we're finding as those projects get built is that it is a lot of seniors who are downsizing into smaller homes, and they're leaving that home available for families to acquire and live in. I totally get your point. It's that kind of thing we want to continue to be conscious of. This is part of why we want to keep developing regulatory approaches that mirror the smaller homes that people are going to need, at the same time that we are paying attention to what climate migration means and the sizes of the families that are going to come. It is very hard, but I do think that all these issues around zoning and land use is about preparing the field here to make sure that the housing that gets built in the future is not, single-family homes on 3-acre lots. That's what this is all about.
Alex, any closing comments for the group?
The long-term trends couldn't be more clear. Historically, the median home price is 3 to 3.5 years the median income. That's true by neighborhood, that's true by market. In the US now, we're hitting the median home price being 5 years of median income. So we are in a moment that is historically abnormal. The median rent is usually around 22, 23% of income, and now it's 30. The shortage is such a dominant story and such a dominant feature of our economic life that it's really hard to see the median home price being 3 times the median income in 5 years. The story of the 1900s in the US was people moving to opportunity. People moving from low-income areas to high-income areas, and productivity rising as people moved where they could find the job that best met their skills and they could provide the most for their family. The story of this century has been people moving away from high housing costs. People moving out of Boston, out of LA, out of New York. Got some in-migration in Maine, but it's really hard to live where the best job opportunities are because there aren't enough homes there. This is a story that if we can reverse this in 5 years, that would be some Houdini work, but we are seeing pretty fast progress in places that are making big changes, and so we know it's possible.
Thank you. Greg, Alex, thank you for being here. This was so informative. I'd like to ask that you please come back and do another presentation to this group. I feel like we could have added on another hour to this discussion. So can we have a round of applause for our panelists? And thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the housing discussion here in Maine, and we'll see you back here in April.